Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 23 playthrough of the Colorado Rockies. We are about to begin the 2054 postseason. The Rockies had a very good regular season, 97-65 record. But after leading the league and all of Major League Baseball in wins each of the past two seasons, we finished tied for second this year with the Chicago White Sox, who we beat last year in the World Series. Both of our teams were one game behind Atlanta for the best record in baseball. So a bit of a different situation for the Rockies. We are back in the playoffs. We will have a first-round bye and home field advantage for the NLDS. But if we are going to get a three-peat, which is what we're going for in the playoffs this year, we won't have home field advantage the whole way through. And we certainly have been a dominant team in Coors Field over the last two postseasons. Before we jump into the final postseason in our OOTP 23 playthroughs, just going to take a quick look at a couple of the moves that we made right before the All-Star break and how they turned out for us. We brought on Jorge Maravilla to bolster our bullpen, and it was a pretty successful trade. Pitched 31 innings for us to over 18 games, 3-2 record with a save, 36 strikeouts, and a 2.61 ERA. So he's definitely been solid, or better than solid, quite honestly. Julio Diaz, the catcher we brought on board, I would say he's been solid. 256 average and 10 homers and 227 at-bats. Solid defensive catcher, durable, pretty much been out there every day since he joined the club, except for his rest days, obviously. And then Tony Coffey is kind of the underperformer potentially, hit 248 with 7 homers and 137 at-bats. Very good fourth outfielder for us, has the range and ability to play center field if we need. And our starting center fielder, Eddie Farley, has definitely been banged up a bit this year. You can see he played just 128 games, had a couple of stints on the IL. So we wanted to be sure we had a little bit of insurance there defensively, and we think we do have it with Mr. Coffey. Just one other thing to note about the great Colorado offense that we had this year. We had Elijah Moore, who led the league in home runs for a third consecutive season. And with the 62 he hit this year, the 62nd coming on the final day, he eclipsed the 61 he had a year ago. And then we also had Adam Fields with 41, Robbie Carrillo with 46, Eddie Farley with 41, and Bobby Perez with 42. So 5 players with over 40 home runs. Pretty impressive offense from the Rockies. We didn't really check in on the team stats for the year at the end of the regular season episode that we last put out. You can see in August and September we played a little worse than we had. Our winning percentage dropped below 600 with a solid but unspectacular performance over the last couple months of the season. But our offense was definitely spectacular, scored 1,038 runs, leading the National League in most offensive categories, over 1,000 runs, just like we were a season ago. First in the National League, and I presume the major leagues, with 331 homers, so 2 homers a game, and we already talked about the massive home run numbers from several of our players. The pitching staff, not as dominant as it was a year ago when we won 113 regular season games, but still to be 6th in the National League in runs allowed, pitching and playing half of our games in Coors is a pretty good result. The most impressive stat to me is that somehow playing half of our games in Coors, we were first in the National League, allowing just 160 home runs. That is definitely a testament to the pitching staff we've built, with a lot of players with great movement on their pitches and a lot of players who have extreme ground ball tendencies. So although we're not going to have home field advantage throughout the playoffs guaranteed, hopefully we can continue to be really successful at home in the playoffs, and would love to close out OOTP 23 with the new version coming out tomorrow, with a third straight championship with these Rockies. And it looks like we will be facing the Milwaukee Brewers in the National League Division Series. We'll check in on the playoff tree in a moment. Just taking a quick look at the financials for the year. Had the highest ticket prices that we've ever had in Colorado at $40 this year, and we just kept them at that level throughout the year. Ended up working out, although attendance fell by almost 9%. Revenue was still up 2.4%. So we're probably pretty close to the sweet spot where we can maximize revenue. So that was, I think, a pretty good result financially. Still not going to achieve our owner goal of ending with a balance of $25 million this year, because we are far into the red at this point. Certainly hope to have a long run in the postseason with a lot of sold-out games at our park and as visitors, but certainly not going to be enough to make up the difference to get this team well into the black as far as our balance. Take a quick look now first at the standings just to see what we're dealing with Milwaukee. They were the other division winner, 88-74 this year, although they obviously did get past their wild card series. They finished the regular season slumping a bit at 3-7 with 3 losses in a row. Taking a look at that playoff tree, they took out the Nationals 2-0, and the Padres took out the Mets 2-0 over in the American League. A couple of 3-game series with the Orioles and the Red Sox moving on. And the Orioles and Red Sox have already taken surprising 1-0 leads on the road against the White Sox and the Mariners in the American League Division Series. Taking a look at our roster and our pitching staff right now for the postseason, obviously down to a 4-man rotation. Alvarado is still our de facto ace, although a 12-11 record and a 5.48 ERA was disappointing. Other than that, it's the 3 lefties, Jose Vasquez, Gus Duran, and Javi Toledo in the rotation. Toledo the last couple years had been our 5th starter who had moved into the bullpen in the playoffs, but this year Jose Ortega, who was 10-10 with a 5.22 ERA, is the odd man out from the starting rotation. He's going to join Tawase Adebamge as a key setup man to Chase Crawford, Maravilla, who we already mentioned, and the brilliant young rookie Elijah Smith, who was 9-3 with 3 saves, 3.27 ERA, and 163 strikeouts and 115 2/3 innings pitched. Are the other key members of the bullpen, and Smith particularly important, being the only left-hander that we have out there right now. And no real surprises with our everyday players either against right-handers. Perez, Farley, Moore, Carrillo, and Fields. The 5 players who we mentioned who all hit over 40 home runs are going to be our first 5 hitters in the batting order. Perez, Moore, Carrillo, and Farley also in the lineup against left-handers. The team is so deep now that Adam Fields is going to move to the bench against lefties for the playoffs. Potentially could be a pretty valuable pinch hitter coming off the bench, as a guy who hit .292 with 41 homers, 39 doubles, 107 ribbies. Definitely feel like that could perhaps make the opposing managers adjust their decision-making a bit with a bat like that coming off of the bench on the likely few occasions we're going to be facing left-handed pitchers in the playoffs. And as we get ready here for Game 1 of the NLDS, you can see we should be pretty big favorites. As we talked about, we led the league in runs scored, 6th in the NL in runs against. The Brewers were a pretty mediocre team, 8th in runs scored, 10th in runs against, and we were 5-2 against them during the regular season. So we are certainly the favorites on paper. We won 2/3 of our games at home this year, which was down from last year when we were completely dominant with over 60 wins at home. But we're still set up well. We've got our ace Alvarado on the mound going against Aaron Wooden, right-hander, pretty respectable pitcher. Was 4-5 this year as a 26-year-old in the majors with a 3.64 ERA. Spent most of the year in AAA. So the fact that a guy like this spent most of the year in AAA, to me, indicates that there's a pretty good level of talent on Milwaukee's pitching staff. Didn't necessarily show up in the results this year, but certainly would in a respectable pitcher, but would think that the matchup favors us in Game 1. And definitely got a 12-3 victory, so off to a good start. Looks like Alvarado got the W, Wooden with the L, Carrillo with a couple of homers, Bobby Perez, and then our shortstop, Jordan Casares, more of a glove than a bat, but he got a homer too. So 4 home runs for the Rockies in the 12-3 victory. And although they jumped out on us with a run in the first and then tied it up at 2-2 in the top of the first, we came back with 6 in the second to really break things open. Bobby Perez hit a 3-run home run in that bottom of the second inning. Alvarado, 3 earned runs over 5 innings. Meravilla came on, scattered 4 hits over 3 1/3, and then Chase Crawford on for the final 2/3, even though it was not a save situation. So a nice start to the NLDS for our Colorado Rockies, and hopefully we can continue the momentum going in Game 2. Would feel real good about things if we can head out to Milwaukee with a 2-0 lead and hopefully put the Brewers' backs right up against the wall, so there's no thoughts in Milwaukee about a realistic chance at pulling off an upset against our Rockies team that, as we talked about, is attempting for a three-peat, which would be our second three-peat in this long OOTP 23 series that began almost a year ago in real time. 16 years with Kansas City, 11 years with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and we are now in our 6th year as general manager of the Rockies. Robbie Carrillo was named the NL Batter of the Month for September, 347, 8 homers, 19 ribbies. Definitely have a strong offense, and he continued his hot September, obviously, with the 2 home runs in the opening game of the series. We've got the lefty veteran Jose Vasquez on the mound going up against David Smith, 30-year-old, was 9-12 with a 4.58 ERA. Little bit above average movement, but neutral tendencies. Really doesn't have a third pitch, kind of a 2-pitch pitcher that they're using as a starter. Would think, and he throws in the low 90s, would think that this would be a pretty good matchup for the Rockies. You never know what you're going to get in any day. It is baseball, but certainly would think that we should be able to score a lot of runs against Mr. Smith today. The question is how many Vasquez will give up to Milwaukee. And we did get a win, 8-4. Looks like Vasquez did get the W. Smith got the loss. Chase Crawford on in relief for a second straight day gets the save. Robbie Carrillo and the catcher Julio Diaz with home runs. Once again, a 6-run second inning for the Rockies. Would love to keep putting up 6 runs in the second inning pretty consistently. Vasquez with a quality start, 6 innings pitched, only 1 earned run, 2 hits and 2 walks allowed with 8 strikeouts. Elijah Smith also allowed an unearned run in his inning and 2/3 of work. So 3 errors: second baseman Danny Ruiz, first baseman Elijah Moore, and shortstop Israel Mays. So that was certainly not the defensive performance that we were hoping for, but it looks like we got away with it. Scored 6 runs on 6 hits and a walk in an inning and 2/3 against Smith. The only nice thing we can say about David Smith is that he actually didn't give up any home runs to us, but certainly feeling good about the Rockies at this point, up 2-0 as we get ready to head to Milwaukee for Game 3 of this series. And as I talked about, we've got the pressure on Milwaukee at this point. Hopefully, with their backs against the wall, hopefully they fold. I hate to wish ill towards them, but our goal is to win another World Series, and to get there, we're going to have to get by the Brewers. We've got Gus Duran on the mound with 17-8 with a 4.06 ERA, the lefty, and we're going against right-hander Jerry Ibarra. Pretty good stuff, decent control. His movement isn't great, doesn't have ground ball tendencies. Seems like a guy that we'd prefer to face in Colorado, where we could take advantage of the ability to hit home runs. He was 13-8 this year, so a nice record for Milwaukee. Strikes out a lot of guys. You can see over 220 strikeouts at least 3 years in a row. Did have a 5.05 ERA, though, and did give up 41 home runs in 190 and 2/3 innings. So certainly would love to be facing him in Colorado, but not the situation here. But we still got enough off of him, a 5-2 victory. Looks like Ortega got the win. Duque out of the bullpen got the loss. Another save for Trace Crawford. Another home run for Robbie Carrillo, who homered in every game of the series. Elijah Moore got his first of the playoffs also. Take a quick look at the box score. We scored 1 in the first, 1 in the sixth. They came back and tied us, but kind of broke things open a bit with 3 in the eighth. Let's see what happened. Elijah Moore, his 1 home run was a 3-run home run in the 8th inning when things were looking very even, and 1 swing of the bat turned things around pretty dramatically. Gus Duran, solid performance, 2 earned runs over 5 1/3. Elijah Smith with a blown save. Ortega with the win in relief. I said Ortega got the win as a start. I'm so used to seeing him as a starter. Some of you I'm sure caught me on that, but Ortega out of the bullpen in relief. Obviously Gus Duran was the starter, and then Chase Crawford with his 2nd save of the series. He finished up each game of the series for us. So good performance from the Milwaukee Brewers, against the Milwaukee Brewers. Take a look at the playoff tree. We have clinched. The Red Sox have clinched an upset of the Mariners. The Orioles still trying to upend the White Sox. And the Braves and the Padres are tied 1-1. And although we are still 8 games away from a potential three-peat, we can certainly argue that division series round of the playoffs went as well for us as could possibly go. We were the only team with home field advantage that won. The Braves, the White Sox, and the Mariners all knocked out. So our 97-win team is still around, but the 98-win Braves, the 97-win White Sox, and the 96-win Mariners are all gone. Gives us a AL East matchup of the Orioles and the Red Sox in the American League. And we still have a tough matchup against a Padres team, a divisional rival that we only beat by 5 games. Certainly would think, on paper at least, avoiding the Braves is a win for us, but certainly the Padres are a team that knows us very well. And I mentioned that the Padres are a team that knows us very well, and they're also a team that was real successful against us this year. They had an 11-8 record against us, so although we did win the division over them by 5 games, as I said, they had our number, and it's going to be a test of strength against strength. The best pitching staff in the National League for the Padres against the best offense for the National League in Colorado. Hopefully the fact that we'll have 4 games in Colorado if we need them will work to our advantage. We've got our ace, Dave Alvarado, back on the mound. Orlando Sanabria, a guy who we have frequently looked at, is a potential free agent. We've never signed him. Always liked his movement and his ground ball tendencies. Played with the Padres this year, 4-7 record, but a 3.93 ERA. Certainly his characteristics that would make him a useful pitcher in Colorado, which is why we've looked at him. He's always wanted to be a starter, though, and with that below-average splitter, just could never come to an agreement with him in the conversations we've had in the past. But it is a matchup of a pitcher who we think could be pretty successful in Colorado going against us. So we'll see how game one goes here. And we got a 5-0 victory, so that was a great start. No home runs, but that is fine. Scored runs in the first and second, and then broke it open with 3 in the seventh. Looks like a Robbie Carrillo 2-run triple was the big blow in that inning. Alvarado 2 hits and 2 walks over 6 innings. Ortega, his former starting rotation mate, scattered 3 hits and a walk over 2 innings. And then Elijah Smith on with a perfect 9th for the lefty reliever to close things out for us. Jordan Casares, our shortstop, injured in a collision at base. We do have Israel Mays is more than capable of playing shortstop, and you can see that he moved there after Casares got hurt, it looks like. But we'll have to see how significant that injury potentially is. Hopefully it's nothing too serious. Diagnosis pending, so I guess we'll find out. Have no problem playing Israel Mays at short. A very productive bat, 260, 27 homers, 95 ribbies. Certainly a better hitter than Casares, but Casares is better defensively, which is why Casares is in the lineup against righties at least. Mays plays third against righties, and then we move him to short against lefties. Mays is solid defensively for a shortstop, well above average, but we do prefer to have the glove of Jordan Casares out there when we possibly can. So we'll find out how serious that injury is. Sprained ankle, out for 4 weeks. So Casares is done for the playoffs. Not an optimal result, but hopefully we've got enough depth in the infield that it won't be a crippling blow to our team, even though it was a crippling blow to Mr. Casares' season. And the injury to Casares, who we put on the playoff IL, means we will get to bring up some help. Decision comes down to the young infielder Edgar Estrada, who we picked up in the Rule 5 draft almost 2 years ago. He was up with us all of 2053, so we could keep his rights. Spent this whole year down in AAA, where he hit close to 300 with 11 homers. Has defensive versatility. You see he can play first, second, left, center, and right. Particularly in center field, he is not particularly proficient, but a left-handed hitter with a decent bat. The other option is Hector Rivera, the young center fielder. He's listed as a left fielder now, but really kind of a center fielder by trade, and we'll change that position back while we're thinking about it. He hit 279 in the majors this year, spent a little time in AAA after Farley came back off of the IL, kept Coffey on the roster. So Rivera did get a little time down in AAA. I honestly feel that we want a little bit more flexibility in the infield. Would have, if he had not been hurt with a strained rib cage muscle, potentially brought up Tony Encarnacion, who's a little more defensive versatility in the infield. If we do make it to the World Series, he could potentially be on the roster. But right now we're going to bring up Estrada, even though he has not been in the majors this year. Just gives us a little more defensive versatility for second, third, and short. Not a ton of decisions that we need to make because Israel Mays is going to obviously pivot over to shortstop, and that will move Alex Ortega, our third baseman, from a platoon role back into playing both against righties and lefties. So Castillo, Estrada, Gamez, and Alvarez are still our bench players as we get ready for Game 2 against the Padres. And as we get ready for Game 2, Jose Vasquez will be on the mound for us, going up against Kerwin O'Regan, who's been really good in the playoffs for the Padres. Another pitcher who's got good traits to be pitching on the road for the Padres against us in Colorado. An extreme ground baller, really good movement on his pitches. Was 6-3 with a 3.15 ERA this year. So second consecutive matchup for us where we're against a pitcher who, at least on paper, is pretty well suited to play and pitch effectively in Colorado. But we got the win again, 12-6. 3 home runs from Elijah Moore. So he really burst out of, I guess, when you hit 62 home runs in a season, 1 home run in your first 4 playoff games does qualify as a little bit of a slump, but it certainly changed that with 3 home runs. Bobby Perez also got his first of the playoffs, I believe. Once again scored early and often, 2 in the first, 3 in the third, 4 in the sixth. They did come back with 4 in the eighth to close the gap on us a little bit, but Elijah Moore, monster game, 4 for 5 with the 3 home runs, 3 runs scored, 7 runs driven in. Ortega getting the playing time now with the injury to Casares was 2 for 4 with a couple of ribbies. Vasquez, 2 earned runs over 6 1/3. Will Lucio, who's had a disappointing year for us, was not good. He's the one who gave up those 4 runs in the 8th. And then Maravilla came on to bail him out. Reagan, we got 6 hits and a walk-off in 3 innings, 5 earned runs allowed. So messed things up for him. Elijah Moore ties the NL playoff record with his 3 home runs and with his 7 runs batted in. So we move to San Diego for Game 3. Gus Duran on the mound for us, going up against Jorge Verdugo. Neither of these players has a decision in the postseason, but Verdugo, particularly with that 1.93 ERA, has been very effective. For the year, he was 11-3 for the Padres with a 2.78 ERA. So the 32-year-old is wrecked physically, but pieced together, looks like 29 starts between AA, AAA, and the majors. I'm guessing he may have been coming back from an injury to have spent so much time in the minors. No, it doesn't look like it. Don't really understand why he was in the minors when this year began, but he was a minor league free agent signing, so just someone who did the job down in the AA and AAA levels and earned a promotion back to the majors and made the most of it with that 11-3 record. We'll see if we can keep the momentum going here on the road. And we do get a 5-3 win to take a 3-0 lead. Duran with the win, Verdugo with the loss, Crawford with the save. Only 1 home run from Bobby Perez. They got 3 home runs. Obviously solo shots by Tapia, Guerra, and Sherman to account for all of their runs. But although on paper the matchup wasn't necessarily great for us, with the fact that San Diego had taken that season series from us 11-8. We're up 3-0 in the playoffs at this point, and their backs are up against the proverbial wall. 3 runs in the third broke things open a bit, although they did come back to close the gap to 4-3. Got a nice insurance run in the top of the 9th. Elijah Moore with another good game, had a run-scoring single in the top of the 3rd to put us up 2-1. Never, ever relinquished that lead. A couple of ribbies from Robbie Carrillo, a couple of runs scored from Bobby Perez, one of them obviously on the home run. Gus Duran, 3 earned runs over 5 2/3. Lefty Elijah Smith on for the hold, and Chase Crawford with his 3rd save of the playoffs. So now we are a game away from getting back to a 3rd consecutive World Series. See if we can sweep the Padres here, keep the tension and the pressure on us as low as possible. Be the first opportunity for our Game 4 pitcher, Javi Toledo, who, as I mentioned, had gone into the bullpen each of the last couple seasons in the playoffs with the strength and the depth of our rotation. He's going to get his first chance here in the playoffs today. 11-8 with a 4.75 ERA for us this year for the veteran, going up against Peter Farrell, a 28-year-old who was 5-3 with a couple of saves. Only started 2 games this year. 4.36 ERA over 74 and a third innings. Maybe they're using him as a opener, possibly. Seems like a odd choice for a must-win Game 4, but it looks like that's the situation that the Padres pitching staff is in. And maybe they should have made a different decision, because we just swept them out of the playoffs with a 3-0 victory. So Farrell pitched okay, but Toledo was obviously better. Another save for Crawford, home runs from Carrillo and Moore with his 4th of the series. So we have had a couple of dominant offensive players winning the MVP of the NLDS and the NLCS. And you can see the Red Sox also swept the Orioles. So 2 division winners who have swept their way through the championship series are going to be facing off in the World Series this year. Quick look at the box score, run in the first, and it was a pitcher's duel, 2 in the 8th. So perhaps I was a bit harsh on Farrell, although he did kind of fill that opener role. Just went 3 innings, allowed 1 earned run, 5 hits. So he did get tagged with a loss, but we certainly didn't rout him. Actually, he was injured while pitching too, or maybe he would have gone longer. So maybe he wasn't actually supposed to be an opener. Toledo, 6 hits, 2 walks over 8 innings, and then a perfect 9th by Chase Crawford. Throws just 7 pitches to pick up his 4th save of the playoffs. Moore and Carrillo, the 3 and 4 hitters, accounting for all of the runs batted in. And our Rockies are on to the World Series to face the Boston Red Sox as we try to pursue a three-peat. And as we're getting ready for the World Series against the Red Sox, got to make a choice on Edgar Estrada or Tony Encarnacion for that utility infielder role. Estrada, as we've talked about, is very versatile defensively, but not particularly proficient, but does have a bit better bat, I think, than Encarnacion. Hit 299. Encarnacion hit 293 in AAA, so not a huge difference in their performance on the field. A little less power from Encarnacion, too, as far as home runs. The bat, similar, but not quite as good, but certainly is a better defensive player and has a little more versatility, as he could also play shortstop or third. Tough decision for us. I think we're going to stick with Estrada because of the bat. Obviously, if we had an injury to any other infielders, which hopefully will not happen, trying not to jinx ourselves in the World Series, it would make sense to bring Encarnacion up. Hopefully it's not a critical decision one way or the other. Estrada didn't even get an at-bat in the series after we brought him up when Casares suffered that season-ending injury. So hopefully we won't really need either of those players, but we are going to go with the player with a little bit better bat than the player with a little bit better glove, because our thought is we still have Juan Castillo who can play second, third, and short at a reasonable level if we do need a defensive substitute late in one of these games because of a double switch. But odds are, I would think that Ruiz, Ortega, and Mays, particularly Ruiz and Mays, are not players that we're going to be looking to pinch hit for at all, given the way our roster looks right now. And the Red Sox, although they didn't have a first-round bye like the White Sox and Mariners, did still win 94 games this year, so only 3 games worse than we were. They came out of the battle-tested American League East, where there were 2 other playoff teams, so certainly a tested team. And the interesting thing that I want to mention about the Red Sox before we try to go for our three-peat and hopefully beat them is that they do have one of our favorite players ever, Isaiah Hill, who was on our team back in Pittsburgh in the day, was a Rookie of the Year / MVP his first year with us, and has had a brilliant career. We couldn't afford to keep him in Pittsburgh, and he's since been with big market teams, the Dodgers, the Yankees, and now the Red Sox, trying to win an elusive World Series championship. That's the one thing his resume does not have at 38, almost 39 years old. Actually, will be turning 39 tomorrow. But he's had an incredible career. You can see he's had over 110 or more ribbies every year of his career, all 16 years of his career. Had over 30 home runs every year of his career, only 2 years where he didn't score 100 runs. Had played 150 or more games every year of his career until this year when he played only 149. So just an incredibly consistent and productive career for Isaiah Hill, closing in on 700 homers, closing in on 2,000 runs batted in. And he's never won a World Series. And we have to hope that he doesn't do it against us now. But certainly if anyone was going to get a World Series against us, we would have a bit of a soft spot in our hearts if it's Isaiah Hill who does it. But that's not going to change the point that we want to win it all, and we want to win it all right now. And on paper, at least, this World Series looks like it could be a classic. The two best offensive teams in baseball, or at least in their respective leagues. The Red Sox were first in the AL in runs scored, third in runs against. We were first in the NL in runs scored, sixth in runs against. Did not play each other during the regular season, with both teams sweeping the championship series 4-0. We've had a lot of days off, so the pitching staffs are set up exactly the way each team would want them to be. Definitely have a contrast in the ballparks. We've got the most fair territory of any major league park in Colorado, and we've got the least fair territory of any ballpark in baseball in Boston. There's about a third of an acre of extra fair territory in Colorado compared to Fenway. So should be interesting to see how this series goes, but think it could definitely be a classic. We'll have our ace on the mound with Dave Alvarado, Jaden Stamper going for Boston, and this is an interesting pitcher for us to be facing because this is a guy we have constantly tried to trade for over the years. He was actually he wasn't, I don't think, on the trade block, but you can see with that great movement, although he doesn't have the ground ball tendencies that we really love, we had been looking at him, trying to bring him over as a reliever. Figured he would be an incredible arm for our bullpen as we got close to the trade deadline. Also would have given us another lefty, but he exercised his rights to not be traded, so we were never able to get anywhere. He's got a no-trade clause in his contract. He was 15-10 this year with a 3.42 ERA, so going to be interesting to see what we can do against him. Certainly a difficult pitching matchup for us, and you could certainly argue that perhaps they have the advantage with Stamper. Obviously, we haven't lost a game in Colorado yet this postseason because, not to jinx ourselves, we haven't lost a game yet this postseason. So we'll see whether we can keep the ball rolling here in Game 1 of the 2054 World Series. And 11-10 victory. Maravilla with the win in relief, Acuiti with the loss in relief, Crawford with a save. Isaiah Hill did get a home run among 3 players on the Red Sox. We got a couple each from Robbie Carrillo and Bobby Perez. So it looks like we thought it could be a classic series, and it certainly looks like Game 1 was a classic. 11-10. Oof. An 8-run outburst in the 7th inning by the Rockies. Ooh, this could be a crushing loss for the Red Sox, which we like to see. They had a huge lead on us heading into the bottom of the 7th, and you can see the win probabilities completely flipped around in that 7th inning. Robbie Carrillo, a 3-run homer in the 7th. Stamper was still in at that point. And then Bobby Perez with a grand slam in the 7th. So those 2 big hits accounted for 7 of the 8 runs in that monster 7th inning. They did come back with 2 in the 8th, but got the job done. So Stamper was really good until that 7th inning. Didn't get an out there. Acuiti, rough outing. Looks like an error cost him by Rosado. Alvarado was not great. 5 earned runs over 4 innings. Will Lucia with another poor performance. But then Elijah Smith came on, stabilized things a bit. Maravilla did give up those 2 runs in the 8th. And then Chase Crawford with his 5th save of the playoffs. 10 pitches with a couple strikeouts to get through the inning. So a fine start to the World Series for the good guys, the Colorado Rockies, with a win that you would hope knocks a little bit of the spirit out of these Red Sox, because they were only 9 outs away, and they had a huge lead on us, and they let it slip away, that 8-3 lead that they brought into the late innings of the game. So could be a potentially crippling loss for the Red Sox, but if they come back and win here in Game 2, they'll have seized home field advantage away from us. That's how quickly things can change. We've got Vasquez on the mound. They have got Jose Utrera, 29-year-old who went 9-5 this year, 3.93 ERA. 5-pitch arsenal, although the changeup is not particularly effective. Neutral tendencies, only slightly above average movement. You would hope that we can take a few over the fence against Utrera. And looks like we did. 8-6 victory, home runs from Carrillo, Moore, Ortega, and Perez. So the Rockies continue to do their best impression of the 1927 Yankees or the 1961 Yankees with the home runs that they have been hitting. 8-6 victory. A little bit of a different game flow here. We took a 6-1 lead into the 7th, and then they had a 4-run inning in the 7th. So the teams that have been behind have had monster innings in the 7th. Fortunately, we kept them to 4, came back, got runs in the 7th and the 8th, did give up 1 in the 9th. Isaiah Hill with a run-scoring triple off of Vasquez. But Vasquez pitched well enough to get the victory. Certainly was not vintage Jose Vasquez, but 5 earned runs, 7 hits, 2 walks over 6 1/3. But he got the W. Ortega with the save, with the hold. Chase Crawford with his 6th save, although he finally gave up a run for the first time in the playoffs. Had a bit of a rough inning, had to throw 21 pitches, allowed 2 hits and that earned run. But the Rockies have done what they needed to do, taken the first 2 games of the series at home, and now we go to Fenway. So it's been a great playoff run thus far for the Rockies as we fly across the country to Boston and get ready for Game 3 of the 2054 World Series. Guessing some posted players from Korea. Not our primary focus right now. Getting ready for Game 3 in Boston. Gus Duran back on the mound for Colorado, going against Danny Cabezas, 27-year-old who was 9-5 with a save, 3.67 ERA, and 115 1/3 innings for the Red Sox. and he will be on the mound as Boston tries to get back into this series with their first home game of the Fall Classic. And the Red Sox do get a win, and we've lost our third baseman, Alex Ortega. So now things can potentially get a little interesting. I'm not going to lie, there was a part of me that has been thinking as we've gone through this playoff run how cool it would have been to potentially have finished off a three-peat and finished off this OOTP 23 series with an undefeated playoff run. Obviously, that is no longer potentially in the cards. Geron got the loss. We got a homer from Tony Coffey. But the Red Sox scored 3 in the first, 3 in the fifth, basically just dominated the whole game. We did get runs in the 8th and 9th. Can't say that we even made it respectable getting those runs, though. Ortega injured while running the bases. Cabezas pitched pretty well. Actually, he didn't necessarily pitch that great. He allowed 10 base runners with 7 hits and 3 walks over 5 innings, but he got his way out of jams, gave up just 1 run, solo home run. So a really nice performance from Cabezas and the Red Sox. And now we've got to see how serious this injury to Mr. Ortega is, because back tightness, moderate impact on running, minimal on hitting and throwing. So don't necessarily want to just bail on him, although with five days that the injury is going to impact him, it's basically going to take us through the rest of the season. I'll have to see what that pitching matchup looks like. We're going to be going up against a right-hander, Linus Knudsen, who was 8-15 with a 5.79 ERA this year. Has a 6-pitch arsenal, although only his cutter and his slider are better than average. But I'm going to say that with the right-hander that we're going to be facing, we are going to just move Juan Castillo into the lineup against right-handers to be our third baseman. And we are going to keep Ortega on the roster for the time being. Don't know why I'm going to the front office here. But I think it's probably not going to make a huge difference either way. But with that minimal impact that it's going to have on, and he's going to have a moderate impact on his game, minimal on hitting, minimal on throwing, but moderate on running. But quite honestly, he's almost a marginal roster player for us at this point. So we are actually going to put him onto the playoff IL, and that will enable us to bring Mr. Encarnacion up for a little more depth. So we will make Mr. Castillo a third baseman, and presumably that will put him into the lineup with Mr. Hartman, presumably batting ninth against both righties and lefties. Yeah, looks like that's the situation there. So a couple of injuries to our starting shortstop and our part-time starting third baseman in the playoffs. But I think we've got enough depth that hopefully it's not going to be a critical situation for us. Ooh, but I don't like what they did to the roster here. That's ridiculous. We can't have Adam Fields on the bench against right-handers. Come on, Nick Hartman. You're a clown. How could you suggest such a thing? as much as it may hurt to take Tony Coffey out of the lineup. That's exactly what we'll do. And we are not going to go with the recommended lineup from him. We're going to move Fields up a bit. All right. I think we are ready to go. So the Red Sox are back into the series, having won game number 3 at home. Took advantage of their home field advantage at Fenway. And now it's a matter of us kind of keeping the pressure on them by winning this one. Javi Toledo on the mound against Linus Knudsen, as we talked about. And we get an 8-5 victory. So we are now 1 game away. Looks like Manny Collazo took the loss. This is another player who we had been looking at for years to try to pick up in a trade for the Red Sox. He is 10-5 right, so he had always denied trades when we would try to put a trade together. Crawford with his 3rd save and the 3 wins in the World Series. Carrillo, Ruiz, and Diaz with home runs. So the Rockies are 1 win away, and this was another comeback. Oh, so painful for Boston. 2 games like this now in the series. They took a 5-4 lead into the 9th, and it was a 5-2 lead when they were going into the 7th. 1 run in the 7th, 1 run in the 8th, 4 in the 9th. Castillo with a single, and Eddie Farley with a run-scoring double off of Collazo. So 2 pretty devastating losses in the late innings with sizable and a huge lead in Game 1 and a certainly not immaterial lead for the Red Sox here in Game 4. So we are on the brink. Not a great performance from Javi Toledo. Went just 2 2/3 innings, but got great work out of the bullpen after that. He gave up 5 runs, only 1 earned. So it was either an error by the catcher Diaz or the shortstop Mays, but we were able to overcome it. And then Smith, Colbert, Sanchez, and Crawford combined for 6 1/3 innings of scoreless relief. And we took advantage of Manny Collazo. Oof. Brutal relief outing, 6 hits and 5 earned runs over an inning and 2/3. And Collazo, with those extreme ground ball tendencies, as I mentioned, is a reliever and another lefty that we had been trying to get. I guess he didn't have 10-5 rights, but maybe he had a no trade clause. He definitely didn't want to come to us. It doesn't say here. Maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe they were just asking for no trade clause right there. If I could read, that would be helpful as I try to talk through these situations. I'm not going crazy. So we will move on to Game 5, and clearly would just prefer to clinch this in Boston. Don't provide an opportunity for something crazy to happen back at home. We won that first game, the crazy 11-10 victory with the 8 runs there in the late innings. Alvarado and Stamper, who are undefeated in the playoffs, at least as far as their 1-loss record, matching up here in Game 5 in Fenway Park. And the Colorado Rockies with a 7-6 victory. Crawford with the win in relief. LeMarchand with the loss. Home runs from Farley, Carrillo with his 5th of the World Series, Elijah Moore, Carrillo the World Series MVP, Isaiah Hill hit a couple in a losing effort. Feel bad that he still has not won a World Series at this point, but the Colorado Rockies get the three-peat, 11-1 record in the playoffs, so that even eclipses the record that we had our first run through the playoffs and even last year. So just a fantastic finish to the season. Take a quick look at the box score. We scored 3 in the second. It was another classic. Look at that. They came back on us in the 6th. We got a run in the 7th. They got 2 in the 8th to tie things at 6th. And then in the top of the 9th, Eddie Farley with that solo home run against Les Marchands. And the Colorado Rockies, 4-1 World Series winners. And the three-peat is complete. So despite a disappointing regular season, and it's always a good thing when you can call a 97-win regular season and a first-round bye in the playoffs a disappointment, but it certainly was. Israel Mays was a big offensive player for us today, 3 for 4 with 3 ribbies. Castillo got a ribby, getting shoved into the lineup as our starting third baseman near the end. Kind of interesting that when we had to trade Isaiah Hill when we were GM of the Pirates about a decade ago when we moved on from him. The guy that we got in return, the key guy that we got in return and the cornerstone of that trade was Juan Castillo. And he's become more of a utility guy. You can see he hadn't been with us these last few years. He did have a stint with us when we first took over Colorado in 2049. Was with us for 3 years, was looking for decent money. He moved on. We brought him back this year to be our utility infielder, and he ended up being a key role in the playoffs, taking over as our third baseman. But the guy that we traded Isaiah Hill for all those years ago helps deny Isaiah Hill that world championship. That's the only thing missing on his resume. Alvarado was okay. Maravilla was not good. Ortega stabilized things, and then Chase Crawford with 1 hit and 1 walk over 2 innings gets the win. So he had 3 saves and a win in the World Series, 0.90 ERA. Isaiah Hill, the player of the game in the loss, left it all on the field, going 2 for 3. The home run, 3 runs driven in, 2 home runs in the game. So just a great performance from Isaiah Hill, but fortunately for the Rockies, we had an even greater performance, and we are going to close out this OOTP 23 playthrough with the three-peat, as I mentioned. We also had a three-peat with Kansas City 15, 20 years ago at this point. I guess it's certainly more than 15 years ago in game time. So the Rockies, with 3 World Series championships in a row, are a dynasty and have achieved what we achieved earlier in this simulation many months ago in real life with the Kansas City Royals with a three-peat. So a great finish to the season for the Rockies, a great conclusion to this series, and a lot of fun that we've had playing OOTP 23. Appreciate everyone who has watched. We still will have at least one more episode in this series when we come back and recap the top performers from the season, and we'll probably also spend some time in that episode recapping the entire playthrough, unless we decide to that we need to break that up into 2 episodes. So at least 1, possibly 2 episodes left before we turn our attention completely to OOTP 24. And we'll take a look back at the key performers for this championship Rockies team in our next episode. And as I said, we're also going to recap the long OOTP 23 playthrough that we've done, take a look at some of the key performers from our Royals, Pirates, and Rockies teams before we close things out for the year. So the Rockies are world champions, and I guess we'll sim ahead one day just so we can move on to the off season, going into the manager's office. Rockies win the World Series. Got to go one more day. We want to finish off with the trophy. And it's going to take a moment or two to let us see that beautiful World Series trophy that these Rockies earned against Isaiah Hill and the Boston Red Sox. Robbie Carrillo had some incredible postseason this year. We'll have to look back and see what those numbers are, but we know that he had 5 home runs in the 5-game World Series, which I believe still would tie him for the record. I can't remember if anyone's ever done more than that. I don't believe so, but if I am wrong about that, I am sure one of the loyal viewers who is still listening will correct me on that in the comments. And your Colorado Rockies are your 2054 World Series champions. As I said, we'll be back with another episode or two to recap everything that we've done over the past year in OOTP 23. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.